Welcome back. You're still watching the PolitBureau. Will Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane survive the Constitutional Court Bankorp judgment that made a finding of dishonesty on her part? This has now become the next debate as the Democratic Alliance, for instance, on the other side, tries to push for Mkhwebane to be sacked. But it's the very same DA whose complaint against President Cyril Ramaphosa, rather the complaint against Cyril Ramaphosa misleading Parliament was substantiated. So what happens now? What happens now here? What do you think happens, politically speaking, before we get into the court judgment? What do you think the opposition in Parliament would be doing, considering that you have this finding of dishonesty, and of course other parties at least calling for the public protector, other factions within parties calling for the public protector to be sacked?
Well, the opposition itself in Parliament is divided. You have the Democratic Alliance that has been calling for the removal of the public protector. They've been clear. And you have the the EFF, who've been saying that she must remain.
And tomorrow they will be marching outside the High Court?
Absolutely.
Yep.
But now, if you saw their statement today, they are not necessarily saying she must remain or she must go. Instead, they are saying we have noted, that is the EFF, we have noted the Constitutional Court judgment, and we are therefore reiterating that it doesn't mean that her other reports that have not been set aside can be ignored willy-nilly. So you get a sense that they possibly are weighing the options. It would be very difficult, Aldrin, for the EFF in particular, because they have been pushing riding on projecting themselves as advocates of constitutionalism. Now, if the Constitutional Court says this woman lied under oath, she pushed, she misrepresented herself, represented herself during the litigation. So those are very serious accusations.
The court saying that she omitted pertinent documents for records. The PP put forward a number of falsehoods misrepresented under oath, and she spoke about experts that were consulted for, economic experts that were consulted on advice on the CIEX report. But the court saying that that was false. That was a lie. Yeah,
it says actually she was not honest. So it will be difficult from PR's point of view. It will be disastrous for the EFF to support somebody who is.
Do you think that they'll still march tomorrow?
Sorry.
Do you think they'll still march tomorrow outside the High Court with the Public Enterprises Minister versus Mkhwebane? This is now the interdict.
Well, chances are they will, because indeed that's a separate matter. It's not been kicked out by any court. They will, because it may just happen. We don't know what the court is going to say. Because remember, as much as we are aware that the public protector has lost two courts, two of her reports were dismissed by the courts. There are two other reports which were validated by the courts. So it can go anywhere. It really depends on how the High Court would interpret the matter. So the EFF will certainly be there, I believe.
Do you know, before we get into the details of this particular Constitutional Court judgment, is the issue around misrepresentation, especially under oath, omitting documents. It reminds me of what happened to Menzi Simelane, who was then the NDPP, and then the DA taking the matter to the ConCourt, and then the ConCourt eventually deciding to set aside his appointment and saying that it was irrational because he was found to have misrepresented himself as well as facts to the Jinala Commission. And I wonder then, on the basis of that particular Constitutional Court judgment, would the public protector even be able to survive this judgment?
Well, the court did not pronounce itself on whether she should remain or not.
Whether she's fit or not.
Because the Reserve Bank also needed a declaratory order, essentially to say that they wanted the court to say she has abused her office. So that, some analysts are saying, would have been disastrous for her. Now, as matters stand, her fate lies squarely in the hands of politicians in Parliament. And of course, legally, as we all know, that's end of the road for her. The Constitutional Court is the apex court.
And what did she have to say after this particular court judgment?
Well, there were about 10 justices of the Constitutional Court who presided over this matter. 8 of them say that she's a liar and all that. I'm just saying, interpreting their judgment. And only 2, and this is Chief Justice Mkhwebane and Acting Judge Goliath, who disagreed with the majority. And she still is using the minority judgment, where the Chief Justice who wrote that minority judgment essentially says, if you are penalizing her, you are sending a chilling message to those who are holding similar positions, who are supposed to be acting without fear or favor. And now they are going to be looking over their shoulders thinking that if I make this remedial action, I might just get into trouble. And he's even going on to say, that is the Chief Justice Mkhwebane, that you are essentially going after a salary earner. So he's trying to say possibly she doesn't even have money to be paying for such. But the other judges are saying, if the remedial actions are lawful, you have nothing to worry about.
The CJ, the Chief Justice, also going as far as expressing himself on the Reserve Bank matter in terms of some of the what he calls apparent corruption on I think it's paragraph 104. This is quite interesting for me that the Chief Justice would actually go this far to actually remind us of the findings of in this particular report and pursuing that money.
Well, let's remind our viewers that at the center here is the money that the Reserve Bank loaned to Bankorp, that defunct bank. Now, there was an investigation done by some London-based person. It's called the CX report. It actually found that there was maladministration, fraud, and corruption. Now, it was swept under the carpet. There was another investigation done by Judge Dennis Davis, sanctioned by the Reserve Bank itself. And according to the court papers, I have not read that particular one. It says there was indeed maladministration, fraud and corruption and all that, but it said recouping the money from ABSA is not a good idea. And there was an investigation by the Special Investigating Unit, which then said that that money was basically a donation, and if you're going to recoup the money, you're just going to throw the markets into a tailspin. So the Chief Justice here is raising a point where he says, for instance, the brightly highlighted apparent corruption, fraud, illegality and impropriety involving the 1.1 billion rand bailout, essentially, nobody wants to talk about it. So the question is, if the public protector was wrong, because remember her office was only established in 1994. Now, that bailout happened in the 1980s. Apparently, by law, she was not even supposed to investigate this. So who then must investigate it?
Who must investigate, and will that money ever be recovered? Thank you so much for your time. After the break, it's Spinners and Spanners.